Supposed biblical error, the death of John the Baptist. Mark chapter 6 gives us the most detailed account of John the Baptist's execution. However, skeptics say there are three errors here. 1. Mark says John the Baptist was executed because he did not approve of Herod Antipas marrying his brother's wife. But Josephus tells us the reason was because Herod was worried John might lead a revolt. 2. Mark records John was both sentenced and killed during Herod's birthday celebration. However, Mark records the party was for the leading men of Galilee, but John was imprisoned down in the southern fortress of Machaerus, which is miles from Herod's palace in Galilee. Herod could not have ordered John's execution and then have it presented at the party in time. Therefore, the Gospels must get the wrong place of John's imprisonment. 3. Mark 6:27 records it was a military officer who executed John, but this would normally be carried out by a civil executioner. So how do we resolve these? Well, with the first one, it can be easily pointed out that they don't really contradict. Let us remember what Josephus says. He says Herod was worried John would lead people in revolt, but he doesn't supply the cause of the fear Herod had. What did John do which caused Herod to worry John would lead the people in revolt? Why would Herod worry about a moral teacher in the desert, unless of course this moral teacher was directly attacking the moral decisions of the king and influencing them to look at the king's actions as unlawful? As scholar Craig Evans says, Josephus has hardly supplied a reason for Herod's actions. What is missed is that Mark supplies the reason that Herod feared John's influence over the people. Herod found himself in a difficult position. His first wife became aware of his intentions and fled to her father, King Artis of Nabatea. Herod's actions shattered the fragile truce between Roman Galilee in the west and Nabatea in the east. Hostilities were almost certain and Herod needed the full support of his people. John's condemnation of his actions was the last thing he needed. Thus, looking at the data, we can see that Mark and Josephus cohere well together. John was imprisoned because Herod feared he would lead the people in revolt. And why did Herod fear this? Because as Mark records, John was criticizing his moral decisions that led to war. These two accounts actually cohere nicely and do not contradict. Also, because of Luke, we know where the Christians were getting their inside information on Herod. In a totally different context, Luke records the wife of Herod's household manager was a follower of Jesus. Thus, we have an undesigned coincidence that explains how the Christians were getting their inside information. The second issue was brought up by Larry Taylor. He claims Mark made an error that contradicts Josephus' account of where John the Baptist was beheaded, because he assumes Mark says Machaerus was in Galilee and not off in the south. But Mark never says the location of the celebration was in Galilee. He merely lists the attendants at the party, which include the nobles, military commanders, and the leading men of Galilee. This is obviously not a claim of the location of the celebration, and it's entirely possible the leading men of Galilee simply traveled south to celebrate the king's birthday. As Richard Bauckham says, the leading men of Galilee, whatever their real sympathies, would be obliged to honor their tetrarch by attending his birthday celebration. The birthday celebration of their king was not something they could simply skip out on because of the distance, and they would have simply traveled south down the Jordan River to Herod's southern fortress for the celebration. Especially since Herod was currently fighting a war with the king of the Nabateans and would need to remain at his southern fortress. His subjects would simply need to offer their support and travel to where he was to honor their king. The final issue works itself out now that we have answered the other two. If John was imprisoned and executed at Herod's southern military fortress, then it makes perfect sense a military officer would carry out the execution. This piece of data can actually be used to show the New Testament coheres well with ancient history, since Herod at this time was at war and residing in a military fortress. So it would make more sense that Herod would use a military officer to carry out the execution, as the Gospels record. Thus, when we use a little common sense, these supposed biblical errors are not even an issue, but actually show the New Testament coheres nicely with ancient history, and thus, there was never any error to begin with.
Alright, yeah. I really do not have much to comment on, and of course in the first video, which is previous video about this biblical error series, I have explained why meaning when we cover all of this so-called error in terms of historical cohesiveness. I would think that most of the video I will just watch and then yeah, that's it. Because I really don't have any, I don't know, anything with regard to that, right? Meaning either way it's just information for me. But it's nice to see this kind of discussion actually happen within those who are very interested in history, right? So yeah, maybe I just add one thing, right? Because I think because this is the discussion that is normal within the Bible context, because it is basically claiming to be historical book of some sort, and that explains why some Christians, when they go to the Quran, they actually impose that expectation on the Quran, as if the Quran also claimed to be historical book. So that I for longest time I never understand why they keep imposing that. Perhaps it's the same way that unknowingly I used to impose the Quran standard, right? The Quran claimed to be the word of God. I always impose the Bible should have this level of standard as well, because is it the word of God. Only later I realized, oh, the Bible did not claim to be that, only the Quran claimed to be the word of God, right? So similarly, a Christian that see the Bible as a historical document should not expect the same to the Quran, because the Quran never claimed to be a historical document. Yeah, so misunderstanding of other books, assuming it is claiming to be the same as our book, might be the source of some misunderstanding. Anyway, so thank you for watching. See you next time.